Welcome to the David Spizak Show. Listen, if you love used cars, you are going to dig this episode. I say that with complete confidence because I'm joined by Brian Kramer. And Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to join. And for everybody listening in, thank you for taking the time to join as well. I always endeavor to deliver great value for the time you've invested. Brian Kramer, I know, is going to help us hit that out of the park. Brian, thanks for joining.
No, thanks for having me, David. It's always a treat anytime I can pick your brain, collaborate with you.
Thank you. Well, hopefully, for the benefit of the listeners, hopefully we'll do an exceptional job. You pick my brain, I'll pick yours. You'll be done a lot sooner than I will. So you could put the shovel down a lot sooner than I can. But I'm confident we're going to get some really good things to share with people. I want to start, though, with this. There's a number of things I want to ask for a lot of reasons. The used car department, it just feels like kind of the used car department is really starting to get its due, right? And I say that because for years it was always, I won't go so far as to say an afterthought, but let's be honest, in many dealerships, new car franchises, it was literally an afterthought. It was the other department, right? And I know—
I would argue in some it still is.
That's my— okay, stay right there for a second. But I mean, most dealers, it was that way. I think today, due to the fact that we've got people like you out there every single week out spending time with dealerships and really working hard to solve the real challenges, including acquisition, that continue to plague most dealerships in this industry. I do think it's getting a lot more oxygen, a lot more airtime. Don't you think that's true?
I do.
Than we've ever seen before?
It's encouraging to see some of these real trailblazers. Like I see some groups that are treating their used car departments like an F&I department, and they're like back, when I started in the mid 90s in F&I or late 90s in F&I, $300, $400 a copy was a good job, but we weren't going out and doing interviews 100% of the time with 100% of the customers. We didn't present 100% of the products to 100% of the customers. We didn't, have 2 or 3 menu objections that we for like clockwork, and we, most importantly, we didn't core comp ourselves, or we weren't core comped to be able to, if the performance fell off. But what I see the top dealership groups doing is they're doing those things in their used car department. They're measuring the tread depth by appraiser. What's the efficiency? What's their OBD scan percentage? What percentage of the time are they notating cosmetic recon? And then having a feedback loop that circles back around, and
in a positive way.
In a positive way.
It's not a beat down, it's a positive way.
You're missing either let's say the price of the reconditioning, which is different than missing it altogether, because, a 2024 windshield on many cars with the ADAS technology is $2,600 to $5,000 for a windshield versus a 2021 might be $800. And it's so much information it's unrealistic, I think, for any human to memorize all those things. So it comes down to inspecting it 100% of the time with 100% of your customers.
Don't you think there's another aspect of this? It's a bit analogous, I think, to back then. And listen, I'm old enough, I started in the business in 1981. I started, and quickly in the first year was in the F&I side of the business. So, I was an F&I manager by the end of that first year. And at that time, I actually started in the business with a company before being in dealerships, helping dealerships start F&I departments. That's right. Most stores at the time didn't have an actual F&I department. Why? Well, they had great fear. General managers and salespeople, managers alike, had fear that somehow getting another person involved was going to cause the deal to go sideways, and they were going to have that customer leave the store, and that was that. Well, we went from that to slowly adopting, and it was a slow adoption, folks. It started actually in the 70s, and we really didn't get to a point of full adoption until 8-10 years later. But by the time we got to that point, I don't think anybody also really understood the power and the value of the F&I department the way, to your point, they do today. So initially there was hesitation, didn't know what to do with it, didn't know if we wanted to get involved, and thought maybe this was going to cost us money, not make us money. Later found out it is the single largest contributor of net profit of anything that you have in a dealership, right? And don't you think used cars is similar? Because we've had for decades people that were passively involved with used cars. I had many stores I knew that literally as soon as they got most trades, they wholesaled them. Didn't want to touch them because their only view of the world at the time was that they would get blasted somehow. They were going to lose a bunch of money and it was going to be a distraction and they wanted nothing to do with it. And we moved from that, thankfully, to most people figuring out that the used car department is indeed an opportunity. But to your point, there are groups today that understand, just like F&I, it doesn't just have the potential to contribute, it has the potential to transform somebody's bottom line. Don't you think, Brian?
Oh yeah. And you're making me think back. I remember when I first got in and I wasn't as experienced or seasoned, but I remember being frequently asked when I was an F&I manager, hey, this customer's way too busy. We just need to print all the paper before they show up and they're going to sign. They can't go through F&I or go with box. And it used to be optional, right? And I look at active appraisals with a client present, and it's optional today in most dealerships. Guarding the process and going through every step of the process today in most dealerships is optional when you talk about the granularity of what is an appraisal and what does it look like. But you and I know many of the same dealers, and I know one that we both know in LA, where I'm at today, that is, doubled and some stores tripled their used car business. And they've got some tougher, they got a nice portfolio, but they got tougher brands, Stellantis, Nissan, where it's not as easy as it is with some other brands when they're heavily divested in those makes. And it's transformed their business to where they're in a growth mode. And it's all from used cars.
It is. And obviously there's a lot of things I would love to get into with you, but you started to talk about, in fact, you mentioned a couple times the early days of Brian Kramer in this business. I would love to be able to just to appease my own curiosity selfishly, but also in fairness to allow people out there. Everybody, oftentimes is very familiar with you. You post a lot. You make a lot of contributions to this industry. And I will speak on behalf of the industry boldly and say, we really appreciate everything that you do for the industry, specifically in used cars and specific to acquisitions. And we'll get there. But would you indulge me and just let everybody know how young Brian Kramer, what steps did you take, or did you stumble? Did you trip into the car business? Were you born into it like some people, or did you just happen to fall into it like most of us?
Well, I definitely fell into it. I feel like it was more like Bane and Batman, like I was born in the service department. But I started off as a lot porter in high school at an Oldsmobile dealership in Columbus, Ohio, and enrolled in college or whatever. And very quickly, after the orientation, I thought to myself, I saw how much money I would make after 4 years, and I knew all these guys that were selling cars always seemed to have a lot of fun. You could smoke cigarettes all day and, in the showroom, and they always had a lot of cash.
In the showroom.
Right?
Oh, my God.
So I said, you know what? I can do that. We can do all those things. So that's how I started selling cars. I fell flat on my face, immediately. And I actually learned how to work the service drive back in 95, 96 from a guy who was going from dealership to dealership, starting a training company called Grant Cardone. And he got me to go back and work the service drive back then, which was a crazy thing. I didn't take it as seriously as I should have because I probably spent more time smoking than I did on the phone. So I ended up going to another dealership where I eventually got an F&I. I think I had an F&I at 19, but it wasn't because of my skills. It was because I knew how to use a computer. Everybody else was intimidated by technology. So that's how that happened. Then I went to go work for the Germains. They were about to go on a huge buying spree. They had there are 2 stores in Columbus at the time, I think 3 or 4 in Naples. So they, 2 different businesses. Fast forward 10 years later, they had 30 plus stores and they were $1 billion company. So I was able to really maneuver with them as they were going through that massive growth mode, and there was a lot of opportunity, a lot of adversity. We opened up a open point Lexus store 3 days before September 11th. So got to experience how to really prospect. We just got a CRM Autobase, so had no choice, had no service department, no customers, and September 11th, all this extra inventory. Dig our way out of that. Then at 24, I became a GM of a Mercedes store that they bought. I was currently selling 12 cars a month and 8 used. Had a union petition thrown on me the first week. Didn't know what that was. So figured out how to overcome unions. And then we acquired some other stores. I started running a platform for them for luxury campus. And then went to AutoNation when I was like 30-something to be the GM of Lexus to Clearwater. Ran that with them for a little while, spent some time at the parts warehouse distribution center. And then in 16, I'd left there to go back to Germain Toyota Naples when Rick bought that from his brother. And walked into, everybody looks at it now, it's a powerhouse and it's a top 25 store in the country and, does all these amazing things, but it wasn't as amazing back then. We had a lot of sales efficiency problems. I was at dealer performance review. So a weekend they said, hey, we're putting you on a, PIP and welcome to Southeast Toyota. You better turn this thing around really quick. They just come out of thick. It was like going to every fixed store, 2 or 3 years, fix it, or a broken store, fix it, going to another one, fix it. So all I had known is heavy combat up until that point. So I spent probably longest I spent anywhere was at Toyota Naples, I think 6 years. And
what did you learn at Toyota of Naples, Brian, that kind of really opened your eyes, exposed you to the power and the opportunity within the used car department?
Well, I guess it was I'd always been passionate about used cars. Then was able to spend time with Dale Pollack and some of the greatest, Mike Burney, whom and a lot of the people at AutoNation, and prior to that, the Germains are phenomenal used car operators. But when I stumbled into meeting Robert Hollinshead, I would say was a huge turning point for me because we were still selling 200 used cars a month at that store at the time, and we were buying, some car, a lot of cars at the auction actually, and buying a lot of off-lease vehicles and a lot of rental car vehicles. So even though we were selling it, we weren't optimizing it to its fullest potential. When Wendell Hardy joined the team, we made a decision that we didn't want to buy any more cars at the auction, but our sales went down and profitability went up. Robert Hollinshead called me up, and that's a longer story, but he said, if you wholesaled more cars, you would sell more retail cars. And at the time I said, well, Bob, I'm not a mathematician, but if I sell less, or if I wholesale more, I'm going to retail less. He goes, that's where you're wrong. He said, this is an exponential effect. You're looking at it the wrong way. You should be looking at how many can you acquire from consumers. Because if you're selling 300, 400 new cars, how many trade-ins should you be taking? And everybody had been focused on your favorite term, look to book, right? Including me. And I never really looked at it like that. Please clarify
my favorite term. It's my favorite term to lambaste, to make fun of, by the way.
And it's like closing ratio, right? Yeah. You can make it whatever you want it to be.
But it's a false number. We know that. Right? We've talked about that. It's a look to book only tells me how efficient somebody was based on the appraisal opportunities. It doesn't tell me how efficient or effective they were at gaining or maximizing appraisal opportunities, which of course you've learned long ago is the key. Not look to book. It's pump the appraisals up, right?
Oh yeah, double, triple the appraisals, and that's what we did. We actually took it from about 300 appraisals to over 1,000, but in order to do that, a lot of trust, a lot of empowerment, a lot of training, a lot of clarity, a lot of expectations, and then we ended up getting up to like 1,200. So then we just had this appraise them all strategy and then retargeting those clients, and I guess. And Hollinshead, was telling me, he goes, I don't know what I would do with that many opportunities if I could put numbers on that many cars. I don't understand why everybody doesn't do it. And I thought,
I still don't understand that today, Brian. I still do not understand that today. And you bring up something, and Bob, there's a lot of reasons to love Bob. And, I had the opportunity, as you know, to speak with Bob as a podcast guest. And it was the only time I had to put an R rating, on my podcast, because Bob is just prone to be consistent with who he always is, and comes from another time and place. But the dude is just straight up brilliant, and he is a purveyor, I believe, of something I'm a huge believer in. I think you are as well, and that's counterintuitive thinking. I don't understand. We talk about, I don't understand why a dealer doesn't do this. I don't understand why everybody wants to do what everybody does, because the last time I looked, that typically renders either average performance or below average performance. If you look at what the incredible organizations do, none of them are doing what everybody does. Is that true?
100%.
Okay, so there's a clue in here, everybody that's listening to this. If you're doing, hey, this is what we've always done, you're wrong. Sorry. Unless what you've always done has gotten you to be number one, right? So if you're a store that you've been number one in the world for 10 years, like Fletcher Jones, I don't know, keep doing that. But the last time I looked,
they reinvent themselves.
Thank you.
That's the ones that are the top are the ones that are the most curious.
They're the ones that are most likely to constantly look for ways to disrupt themselves and to reinvent themselves. And the whole thing is, it turns out the reason they've been number one for over 30 years is because they have not done the same thing for 30 years. They've never done what everybody else did. So, okay, you did that. You learned a lot. And one of the things I do want to call out that I think is critical for everybody that's listening, and anybody in any dealership. One thing, I'll never forget a conversation. You and I used to talk a lot back when you were a GM and operator at the Toyota store in Naples. And I remember, like a mad scientist in the laboratory, you were dead set on trying to figure out how the heck can I sell cars online when you can't sell cars online, right? Because the tech wasn't there. The DMV wasn't there. There's a lot of pieces of that wasn't there. But yet you're sitting there watching Carvana do it, and you're going, okay, I got to figure this out. Well, you did something that I don't know that anybody's ever really spoken about too much, maybe at all. And that is, I remember you literally band-aided and duct taped a bunch of processes and tech together under the surface that made things a lot harder for the people at your store. But what it did is it transferred the friction away from the consumer. And the reason I think that is so important, because of what we're about to talk about, is because everybody says, I want to reduce the friction. I want to be like Amazon. I want to be like Apple. But guess what? You're not. You're not going to do that unless you either have the tech they do and the resources they do to create a truly frictionless environment.
And the culture they do, and the clarity of expectations.
From day one, you're right. Or the only other option is understanding that there's no way to make friction dissipate, but there is a way to transfer it away from the client. And even Carvana, if you look at in the beginning, that wasn't all tech driven. There was a lot of humans involved in that online process, a lot of humans involved. But what they brilliantly did is the customer couldn't feel it. It felt like technology. It felt seamless. So I think that's tremendous. And I think that was one of the big jumping off points, that when you had the opportunity to go work for Alex Vetter, who I think is just an extraordinary leader, and talk about culture, extraordinary culture, and a big believer, always advocate for dealers, gives you an opportunity to jump ship from retail, where you were really making an impact, to having the opportunity to make an impact and help dealers across the country transform. I'm interested to know, since you made that decision roughly 3 years ago, what have you learned about acquisition and helping stores achieve that?
Well, before I answer that, I'll add a little context to what you were just talking about. There's a lot of things that I still see today that I learned in that journey, especially during COVID. There was all this downtime. A lot of people were shutting down, packing up. What are we going to do? I remember Mike Maroney telling a story about when there was this economic crisis down in South Florida, and he just built this big Margate auto mall. And he said, we had two different choices. We had all this inventory, huge rent factor. What are we going to do? He goes, so the only thing I could think to do was double down. While everybody else is zigging, we're going to zag. Kind of like what you were saying with counterintuitive thinking. So I remembered that. And as soon as COVID happened, I told everybody, I go, look, we're inches away from this thing all coming together, because everybody been pushing back. Why do we need to do this? This is a lot of work. Are we really going to make that much more money? What's the point? So what? There's friction for the customers, friction everywhere. And all of our competitors have it too. And I said, well, that's going to be our competitive advantage. And we're going to lean into it. Well, we can't do tag and title. We can't do trades. We can't do blah, blah, blah. So I didn't turn down any inventory when everybody else was, and took a bunch of extra inventory, which ended up being a huge growth accelerator for us at that store at the moment, like April or May of 2020. I also I had time because COVID, so I wasn't satisfied with the answer of we can't do these things. So just wanted to start attacking them. I remember being on hold with the DMV Florida for 4.5 hours in the back room of the used car department, just waiting. And all of a sudden somebody actually picked up, and I'm like, whoa. And I said, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to digitize. I called Tallahassee, the capital, how to digitize tag and title. And it's fascinating to me because this tribal knowledge, everybody in the industry, the smartest people in the industry, everybody's always, at every one of the biggest vendors, can't do it. And they said, no, we actually updated that for the state of Florida 6 months ago. You should have gotten it in your FADA alert. Well, I didn't read it. It was buried somewhere. Then I'm like, wait, what? And it had already happened. I could have done it even sooner, but everybody kept telling me it's impossible. Then I got to call the vendors, DMS, all the credit apps, all that stuff. Nobody else knew how to do it. Nobody else knew this. And I would say that not many people, and you say it all the time, are curious enough to figure these things out or to figure out who's doing it. When Carvana was grabbing market share, gobbling it up from me, and they bought a car in front of my showroom, and the customer sold their car to Carvana faster than they could sell it to me in my own showroom because it was a busy President's Day weekend. A lot of people were like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm going to figure out what they're doing. I'm going to do that better, get back at them, right? And I don't think that enough people are looking at it that way, like Carvana. It's very easy to, demonize them and their tag and title. But what was a huge weakness for them is now a huge strength because they reinvented themselves and they got at it.
And they continue to, by the way.
Failing forward. Yeah. And they didn't give up. And I see too many dealers, to answer your question, as I go around the country, when those moments of adversity come up and there's a lot of friction and they're like, I tried that. That's a lot of brain damage. We're not doing that. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. We're still profitable. We're doing good. We're hitting NCM benchmarks or whatever the benchmarks are for them. And we're okay. And I think that's what's fascinating to me is there's so much talent and so much resilience. And I know that if there's some other economic event or something that happens, those same dealers can do it, and they have the ability and the acumen. But it's almost like there has to be some leadership change, or there has to be some trigger event to get them out of their comfort zones to lean into that friction. And the friction that you're talking about, while everything's happening with COVID, we're disrupting it. And I remember the marketing director around my agency, Lauren Rhodes, called me up and he goes, "Hey, what do you want to do? You got all this inventory. Are you going to advertise?" Because I can get 6 to 8 times frequency on this rotation. I go, "Yeah, we're not going to cut the ad spend. We're going to keep it going." But I said, I got to change the messaging. I can't keep doing these $199 or $199 down, deceptive ads. And I said, I've been to all these seminars and everybody keeps telling me this. I'm just going to listen to the customer for once. And we're going to go simple, fast, easy. He's like, "Well, what's the hook?" I go, "That is the hook." And it was really counterintuitive. We ran this TV commercial that got 1 million views on YouTube. A young lady her husband ordering a pizza, and then she ordered a car from GermainToyota.com.
I love it.
And they were both happening at the same time. But here's the friction point to answer your question that we had to absorb. I had a line outside of my office, but people saying we were doing deceptive advertising because they said it was complicated. slow, and hard. And it wasn't simple, fast, and easy. So, yeah, we had to absorb that. And we had to look in the mirror and realize that we weren't as good as we thought we were. And what we were saying, oh, yeah, we're frictionless and all that stuff, we weren't. Well, so we had to become that.
I want to make sure we cover a couple other points, but I do want to bring up to everybody one of the things I'll never forget in being a Mercedes-Benz dealer is going to Stuttgart and learning that around the factory at Sindelfingen that when there was an accident involving a Mercedes, not only was police and ambulance dispatched, but Mercedes engineers were as well. And they wanted to learn everything they could about accidents and safety. And one of the outcomes of that, Brian, was they learned not only how to make their own car safer, but they literally learned how to transfer the energy of the accident from the car that struck the Mercedes to the Mercedes, knowing the Mercedes had the capacity to protect the occupants better than any other car. So you imagine they transfer that negative energy, that impact over there. Great dealers do the same thing. I want to jump over to acquisition. I've got a few things I think they're really important that are on the top of people's minds. Everybody's been talking about acquisitions. I just spoke to 45 dealers in Phoenix fairly recently. Hey, what's your number one challenge with used cars? Acquisitions. I just spoke to a 20 group for Mercedes. What's your number one challenge? Acquisitions. I was at the California New Car Dealer Association doing a keynote. What's your biggest challenge? Acquisitions. Well, you've been knee deep in acquisitions, obviously for a long time, but specifically, you've been working at Cars Commerce as executive VP, directly involved for many times with dealers with AccuTrade. What have you learned since then that dealers should know about how to solve the acquisition challenge once and for all?
So the Carvanas and the CarMax of the world, which I think do a great job, wouldn't exist if dealers did a few things. One of them is if they put numbers on all the vehicles. So if I was to break this down into three pieces, I would break it down like this. Number one, appraise them all. Appraise anywhere, all the time, always on strategy. If Kyle Disher, Jason Rice, with Rev Dojo and Lot Pop, I get numbers from 13 to 17% of the leads in a CRM have a trade attached to, when 70% of consumers have a trade.
And that has not changed, by the way. Despite all this extra oxygen, all this airspace and conversation about used cars, it's the same number. So
how many have a trade?
Right. So number one, and by the way, there's still half the stores in America that probably do not want to or will not give me a value on a trade-in if I'm calling in. Unless you come in, I'm not giving you the number, right? Unless you're buying something, I'm not giving you the number. So number one.
And Rev Dojo says that number is 80% on mystery shops.
Wow.
People do not give a number.
So number one, the rule is appraise everything, all the time, everywhere. Yes?
Yes. And here's the primary reason why. You can't retarget. You can't remarket. You can't do a save a deal meeting. You can't revisit, what trades you missed. And you and I have talked about this, at length, but we did a study at Cars Commerce and 120,000 appraisals. And of those 120,000 appraisals, the majority of the rooftops, and these are good groups, it's like 35, it's like 60 rooftops within this sample. The large swath, over 50% of them appraise less cars than they sell. But they all have like a 50% look to book. So
there's look to book. That's my problem.
You got to get the volume, and you got to appraise at least twice as many cars as you're selling retail. That's the first thing. You've got to be at at least a 50% trade capture. If you sell 100 cars, you're taking in 50, but 60%, 70% is obviously the goal, but 60% really keeps you to where you're self-sustaining, and maybe you buy some cars strategically, but you're also sourcing cars from consumers. You've got to be self-sustaining. And by doing that, the stores that appraise less cars than they sell, which was the majority, also have over 20% mistrade, where they're getting their appraisals conquested by somebody else. When you appraise more, the dealers that appraise twice as many as they sell were all below 10%, most of them between 6 and 8% of losing their trades to somebody else. So if you don't give somebody a number, the moral of the story is somebody else will.
Again, counterintuitive thinking, right?
Counterintuitive.
And
yes.
Because I think dealers, tell me if you agree with this, dealers, but got the data to back this up, dealers that don't appraise a car, right? And you were talking about the F&I menu earlier. Guys, listen to this. When the F&I menu was introduced, the industry doubled its BVR. Customer got a better experience, a better ownership experience, helps the service department, increases your retention, and the dealership makes more money, right? So the F&I manager can't decide today, hey, if they're going to do an F&I menu or not. It is mandatory. MPIs for techs are mandatory. I don't understand. Here's one. If you have thousands of dollars, market share, inventory turn, F&I and recon opportunities, trade acquisition opportunities, somebody needs to explain to me why appraisals are not mandatory. And the number you're saying, if I'm selling 50 cars, I should have 100 appraisals. The reason for that is most stores are closing at about a 45% rate on their write-ups, right? So if I sell 50 cars, I have to have at least 100, 120 write-ups. Why would I not have 80% of those? That's what you're saying, right, Brian?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
It's great. Now, what about, keep going.
Nobody's asking the question, where are all these trades? They should be happening at the sales.
I'll tell you where they are. They're at your competition. Because if you don't appraise the car, you just created the hottest lead for your competitor. That's where they are.
And then, and to your point, that's where they intersect. If I'm in retail tomorrow, I'm going to be putting numbers on everybody, and I'm going to spend more time on my appraisal acquisition strategy than I am on my retail pricing strategy. Because when you acquire the right inventory, you don't have to have the strongest sales staff in town. You don't have to have the most aggressive pricing strategy, because highly desirable cars sell quickly. They don't age out. So that's a competitive advantage. You don't have to be so granular. But most dealers, I was one of them, put almost all of their effort into a retail repricing 2-3 times a week, do it, all spending hours, and I mean, a dozen hours a week, but across multiple people, doing this to do the photos, rephoto it, merchandising, all of that. But they spend no time at all on the acquisition pricing strategy. Where do I need to be at? What am I the best end user at? What do I need to be acquiring? And that's what the best are doing, is they're spending more time with acquisition strategy, and they're using it as a hook. I mean, we're already seeing that the point of entry for acquisition is or for sales is through the trade. I mean, think about, we're hitting records right now, 28, 30 million unique visitors a month at cars.com. But Carvana is like at 22 million, and they're only going there to do one thing, right?
That's right.
They don't advertise they sell cars. They advertise they appraise cars and sell 155,000 cars last quarter in the process.
And a really good thing to bring up here and validate this for me, or challenge me if you don't agree. But there's a very good reason why CarMax and Carvana figured out that they should do a massive, massive pivot with respect to marketing. And instead of spending 100% of their marketing budgets on trying to entice people to buy a car from them, they turned around and spent between 80 and 100% saying, no, we've created an easy way for you to sell your car to us. And by doing that, they did that because they learned that the average value of that interaction was oftentimes 2, 3, or 4 times higher than simply the act of just selling a car. Agreed?
Agreed. So number 2 ties into that. And that would be that you need to you need to be in the hunt. I think it should be a real number, if you're going to play with Carvana. But everybody's got a different risk-averse way. But the risk aversion is killing dealers right now. If you want to be granular, and Carvana's not the best end user on every single vehicle. 0 to 3-year-old vehicles, they're in the hunt. But the average car on the road is 13 years old. What I would say is this: when I go to speak at 20 groups, I always ask everybody, hey, why don't you give numbers over the phone? What's the hesitation with giving the strongest number? Because CarMax, Carvana, AutoNation, USA, Lithia Driveway, they're putting a very aggressive number at a centralized level out there. And you've said it before, like 75-80% of those are automated. But of the 75-80%, they put a lot of strategy and stuff into it. And they're not lowballing it or trying to see if they can hold back, or the used car manager hitting one number, then the new car manager is now holding back on that number when it's sight unseen, the customer never comes in. They're just saying, hey, if you say it is this and this and this, then yeah, we'll give you that. And then they know that they're going to do an active trade appraisal with the client once they arrive 100% of the time with 100% of the customers. But what I see, when you were asking me earlier, what are some things that I observe around the country? I see a lot of dealers, and great dealers that say, well, yeah, but what if it's probably going to need tires, or it's probably going to need that? And my answer to them is, worry about that when they get here. Your whole goal is to get an appointment. Why would you bring that up if the customer didn't bring it up? If the customer says, yeah, it's a 10 out of 10, then give them the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. Why are you going to start holding back and get risk averse on cars? Or, you know what, I don't, because of this and this, and versus just going with it and just putting a number on the car so that they arrive. You're going to get more appointments. You don't have to all save it teams.
Brian, another thing that occurs to me though, if you're doing business the way you always did business and you're doing an old school appraisal, it relies on that human showing up in order for you to give the number, because it relies on you physically putting your hands on the car and driving the car. There's a big difference. When Carvana or CarMax is doing it, it's not a human appraising the car. Start here. It's the technology that appraises the car. Now, one of the things I have come to love about AccuTrade, and there's a lot of things I do love about that, but one of them is just the simple fact that when I'm working with my dealer clients and they have somebody who's not in the dealership, maybe they don't want to come to the store. Maybe they're 45 minutes away. I've been showing stores all over the country that more than 20% of their new car sales and more than that of their used car sales happen way out of their market area. So think about this. So they're not going to drive 2 hours or an hour and a half or 45 minutes in traffic. But so the average dealer with an old school approach is going to say, well, dude, if I can't see the car and lay eyes on it and do my old school approach, I can't give you a number. I don't have any confidence. But Carvana, CarMax, and an AccuTrade dealer goes, no problem. Are you familiar with Carvana and CarMax? Yeah. Okay. Well, is this your cell phone? Yeah. I'm going to text you a link. So the same process that they use, that people trust around the world and around the country, you just click on the link. You have one key or two. Has it been smoked? Has it been modified? Your make, model. Make sure you put all the options in so we can give you maximum value. And then you could even take pictures. Hit submit, comes back to us, and within 30 minutes, we can give you a guaranteed offer if my used car buyer's looking for that vehicle. How's that sound? Freaking sounds great. Well, I can do that because the very process that you have in AccuTrade allows me to do that with total confidence. And here's the thing. You just said you got to give the client the benefit of the doubt. Let's say they're wrong. Let's say they were optimistic. No problem. If they click boom, 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 it needs no repairs, it needs no maintenance, everything's groovy, and they show up and it's not, no consumer, reasonable consumer, and I don't want to hear about the 10%, but no reasonable consumer is going to go, interesting, you didn't mention your two tires are bald. Okay. And Carvana and CarMax has relied on the decency and the rational approach of most customers, and it's worked pretty darn well, hasn't it, Brian? Do you agree with that whole process?
I couldn't agree with what you said more. And as I go around the country, it's been years since I've actually experienced that. Well, I'll tell you, the only times that I experienced that, and here's when I experience it, is when the client comes in and they didn't put it into AccuTrade. It's AccuTrade Felix. And we go back and look, and they said, well, no, I gave all this stuff to the used car manager. Well, why isn't it in the system? Well, I wrote down the VIN and the miles on this Post-it note, right? And there's like 10 Post-it notes at the bottom of the used car manager's monitor. And that's like their sequence of how they're doing sight unseen appraisals. And they take the VIN, miles, they look at an average MMR, and they go, just tell them it's going to be around this. And instead of just being granular, because they're not putting enough money on the right cars, and the bigger problem is you're putting too much money on the wrong cars. So that closes out my number two. Number two is, when the three things that every dealer tells me to 20 group why they don't do it is, I don't think the client's going to be honest about their conditions. Well, we see that that's like over 85% of their clients are, but even on the other 15%, To your point, I've never seen one that's unreasonable. Once you go out there like with an MPI and match up, hey, this is what it said online. This is this, so I was going to make a few adjustments, and here's why we made the adjustments. But then still, you're negotiating recon. You're not negotiating the trade value, these big swings. The second thing is, well, I don't want to leave money on the table. I don't want to leave gross on the table. The gross that is being left on the table is when you have a 30 to 35% trade capture, when you should have a 60% trade capture, because you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies, and the dealers aren't focused on trade capture. You don't, in my mind, you shouldn't have the right to be able to hold back and do these massive under allowances until you're at 55 or 60% trade capture. That should be the price of admission in the
boy, you know, I will go further. I cannot understand how any dealership again will tell me that I'm obsessed. We are obsessed culturally with clients and exceeding expectations and delivering a superior experience. My response is always, what part of that is ripping the trade or stealing my trade? It's incongruent, right? This is back, what are we, in the 80s or 70s? I get the fact that this is not malicious. I get the fact that sales managers are simply trying to sometimes optimize the deal. Sometimes they're just trying to work the negotiation of the deal, which you have to do because the client maybe has a negative, equity, or maybe they're trying to give them a bigger discount off the front end of the car. The optics on it, Brian, are terrible. And the reality is terrible. And the reality is you're teaching your salespeople to not bring appraisals because we're not going to take care of the customer. And you're teaching your market, this is not the place to bring your trade. You have to have a long-term view. I got a couple things I would love to touch on.
Last thing, you have to eliminate over.
You had a third thing that you wanted to touch on. What's the third? So number one, let's just encapsulate. Number one is you got to appraise everything all the time, everywhere, however a client wants to do it. Number two is you've got to be less risk averse. You've got to put a real number on the vehicle, and you've got to try to win the trade. You got to be the one leaning in on this.
And the third thing, and this is the other pain point that I went through, I said, if we're out there telling everybody on our website and everywhere, and to your point, the salespeople, we want to buy people's cars, but then we're still over allowing, under allowing. Over allowances to me are the bigger problem. I eliminated that. I had to write up 2 key managers, then to transform that business. And they still to this day don't do over allowances. And I had, they said, we're going to miss deals. We do it on, 20% of our deals, just because they want more for the trade. We're competing with the Nissan dealership that does it, or this other dealer that's doing these crazy ads. And I said, well, I want to talk to and this is the friction that we're talking about. I said, every single customer that objects over the trade because you can't over allow, I want to talk to them. So just tee them to me after you talk to them first. Then I want to meet them if you can't close them, because I want to understand. I'm curious. I want to understand where they're coming from. The pain of that forced that we didn't, and we're still hitting 120% of our Toyota objective with Southeast Toyota, which is not an easy thing to do month after month after month. But it was just a path of least resistance. And I also had to write up, gentleman who's now the general manager of that dealership. And he's like, are you serious right now? And I said, I have to do this because I need to tell you how serious I am about this. Please don't put me in a situation because you're way too talented. But I had to hold them all accountable to realize that, because they just kept doing it, right? They're like, what are you talking about? That's insanity.
So what's the problem from your perspective on it?
The problem is that you don't really believe in the number. You're still playing pricing games versus the discipline of actually getting strategic and getting curious about why is CarMax or Carvana putting more money in the trades? How are they setting up their competitive sets? Why do we have to over allow? And most of those customers, they left, they got, I'm going to go over there. Okay, well then you get to the other dealership, ask them to go buy the car from you for that. Because even if you buy the car from the Nissan store, we'll still buy the car from you, even if you're not buying one from us.
But Brian, I want to make sure that I understand this so that we could share it with everybody listening. Is the problem in your mind that the over allowance is only an over allowance because you're under allowing to begin with on the car? And if you gave it the actual market value the way Carvana and CarMax would, we wouldn't have an over allowance.
There's no need for it, right? Because it's not worth that. And I go, and the customers, and you need to get better at justifying why it's not worth that. In most cases, the customer already knows that, and they know that the over allowance is the BS number. So it diminishes the belief with the salespeople and the customer that everything else is valid because of the pricing games. When you start trying to chase payoffs and all of those things, you and I have talked about this before, the aggregate loss ratio. At the end of the day, most people don't, it's on earnings calls for some of these companies where they said, well, what's to keep franchise dealers from doing this? Oh, they don't look at aggregated loss ratios. Aggregated loss ratio, for everybody on the call that doesn't know what that is, it's what Amazon, it's what every major business runs with, is we're going to have, it's like policy adjustments. We're going to have a 5% loss ratio or 6% loss ratio. Everybody has it on their used car department, but nobody ever factors it in.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm going to hit all of these cars. I'm going to appraise all these cars, and I might lose money on one of them or two of them. But I find, to close this out, the over allowance, the under allowance, the biggest risk aversion is that everybody's like, what if we lose money on this one? Instead of looking at the 9 out of 10 they're going to make money on, but really the 99 out of 100.
And don't you think, again, it really speaks to all of the other very critical aspects of a used car operation, a great used car operation, because let's face it, whether somebody has a UA or an OA, it is compensating for something else that's not done right?
And it's typically that there's not an active trade appraisal. They don't have confidence, and they're chairborne, not airborne, to go out there with the customer and walk around the trade, or they don't have confidence their team will, so they want to get risk averse.
Or they're not relying on the technology, Brian. They're over-relying on the person. So let me jump into a couple other things. I think that, these things, again, and I apologize, this is my curiosity, but there was a big announcement just a short while ago, not too long ago, a couple weeks, about Carson, right? And Carson is the first AI agent that sounds like it is completely embedded within the cars.com marketplace. And I want to get to my last question is going to be about the value, why marketplaces themselves are so critical, the cars marketplace in particular. But could you just share for about 5 minutes what in your mind is so groundbreaking or transformative for dealers about Carson?
Absolutely. So up until a month ago, you get into most marketplaces and there's filters, and you have to select, the customer has to select the year. It's similar to, most other websites, right? But that's not how customers or consumers are shopping today. They're getting on the ChatGPT, they're getting on to Gemini, and they're not on Google as much. And it's just exponential growth. To be able to do that type of experience and embed it into cars.com looks like this. Old way is looking for a 2022 to a 2024. I want a vehicle under 25,000 miles. So you're going through the filters. Maybe you say, 10 to 25. Then you're like, okay, now a TRD off-road. Do I need an off-road? Do I need a sport? What's the difference? Well, I can't do that at that point, right? And then I want color, but I got to go to another filter. And now all of a sudden you've chunked it down so low. And then, but you want Apple CarPlay. But Apple CarPlay, because most dealers didn't put Apple CarPlay in the buttons when they click on the actual options on the merchandising, it's not showing, but it's showing in their comments because they somebody manually typed it in there. So it eliminates 85% of the Tacomas because of that in the old world. So it's frictionful. It's just what it's always been, right? So nobody knows any different. Fast forward to Carson, and you just type in, look, I'm looking for a white, black, or gray used Tacoma, a TRD or a TRD Sport. Tell me the main differences, and I want one with Apple CarPlay and four-wheel drive. You don't have to click on all these. That takes seconds, but it also gives you a way more robust and dynamic search, and the results is going to give you a stacked rank, and it's going to have just the vehicles like that, but it's not just looking at what somebody clicked on the little cadence buttons on their inventory management tool. It's actually looking at what was in the merchandising text and searching for those actual contextual searches and putting all of that together to give consumers a much more targeted, robust set way faster. But here's the math behind it. They're converting 30% better in terms of conversion rate on the VDP to SRP conversion. The lead count doubled because they're pulling them way further down the funnel. And there's
less friction.
All kinds of other Yeah, way less friction. So there's 15% of our consumers that are choosing to go down that path. A lot of people are like, why wouldn't you just switch the whole website over? Which obviously that's tempting. And those are the things that I like to do. But also, just like EVs, I think it's important that you don't force them one way or the other. You let them make the choice. And if that's how they want to do it, it should be a consumer-led journey. But I think we're early on. But if the growth so far has been staggering, and it's only been turned on for a few weeks.
So it seems to me there's a couple of huge takeaways. One to me is the 15% is interesting because that seems to mirror about the same percentage of people that are relying on chat or some form of AI to do their shopping journey versus the old school, I'm looking for a Toyota Tacoma TRD and typing that into Google, and then Google's going to return about 4 billion freaking pages.
Right.
Only the first page is going to get looked at, only the first two, and now you have to become a research scientist to click on every site. But instead, I could go to Carson, and with that power of AI, I could speak to Carson as if I'm speaking to you and say, hey, Brian, I mean, if I was sitting in front of you and I'd say, hey, Brian, I'll tell you what, right now I'm looking for a 21 to 23 Toyota Tacoma. I'm cool with a Sport or a TRD. I would love to have white or some other light color. I want a light color interior, blah, blah, blah. And bam, it's going to find it. And I was able to do that in a conversational format. And by the way, also leveraging the power of AI, which is really tends to be more on the contextual side, right? So it's why dealers have learned that Dealer Rater has become such an important tool that nobody thought about 2 years or 5 years or 10 years ago, because Dealer Rater is so contextually rich, right? So
I didn't think about that.
I mean think about that. It's very contextually rich compared to that didn't mean anything at the same level 2, 3, 4 years ago. Today, I learned that Dealer Rater, only Reddit is a higher, more powerful system when it comes to creating context. And the reason why that's important for those listening, it's not SEO that takes the client there, right? It's GEO, it's generative engine optimization, which is all built on contextual, blog posts, social, all of those things. So that's huge. So Carson, you're saying better experience for the consumer, but you also end up with a better lead, higher quality lead with, if I heard you right, higher quality lead, higher conversion rate. And you're just literally weeks into this and it's already 15%.
And there's a lot more enhancements that are going to be coming out. This is really just Gen 1.
Yeah.
Matt McDonald, who I know that you're speaking with.
Yeah, I asked to speak with Matt as well because I want to get even deeper on Carson. But can we, before we wrap up, can you jump in? Speaking of the marketplace, in your mind, just to wrap up, what is the value and the importance of the marketplaces and the cars.com marketplace for today's dealers?
So I think that it's an ever-changing thing. And when I was in retail, you can get, and I guess when I was in retail, Google was doing things differently and they didn't have as much, competition in the space, right? So there was a lot of disruption, but right now there's more disruption than there's ever been, and Google's being disrupted by ChatGPT, Perplexity, disrupting themselves with Gemini. But I think it's important to note a few things. AI overviews are now like 70% of all the searches out Google. And with AI overviews, there's not 4 or 5 or 80 million searches like you're talking about, the queries that come up. There's only one. There's one answer. So how do you show up in that answer? And it comes down to content. It comes down to what you said, user-generated content. Some people I diagnosed my daughter's Tacoma the other day because I didn't know if it was a real issue or not. And it said there's a 78% chance based on all the Reddit and Dealer Rater information that it's this. And I called up and sure enough, that's exactly what it was. And there's a bulletin out for that Tacoma on that. So the way that all of this user-generated content across EVB and the Nextdoor app and Dealer Rater, Reddit, and everything in between is ingesting it. It's pulling it from there, but it's also pulling editorial content, which cars.com and a few other marketplaces generate. But this SEO versus you said GEO world, two completely different worlds. And marketplaces are what's powering that second part of the world with all the reference articles, with citations.
Yeah, that's very different. I don't know if a lot of people realize this. I've tried all of the different engines, and people use different ones, and some people use multiple, right, as part of the process. And then what really stood out to me about your marketplace is the level, how content rich it was in terms of the research, the things that would allow me. I would used to go into Auto Trader like a lot of people, and you just say, "Oh, I'm looking for this, this, and this." This many miles between this price and this price, between this year and this year. Bam, go. And then again, kind of like the Google search, I had to become a research scientist from there and figure it out. When I went onto your site, there was so much content, so many resources that literally would help me as a buyer, as a shopper for something, looking for a car for somebody, to find exactly what I'm looking for and to have the confidence to not only pick the right car, but I pick the right place. And do you see it the same way?
Well, that's what's powering these GEO searches. And it's all written in schema. And these citations, because we're heavily cited for that, that's why we're by far the strongest on GEO search. But you can look on any of these.
I think it's funny you bring that up, because I'm on ChatGPT all the time for dealers all over the country, and I'm doing projects on AI visibility for them. I'm doing projects, for AI readiness. I'm doing projects, to teach them how they can compete or over-index against their competitive set out there, all these things. And I'll tell you what, I challenge anybody to do this. If you go out and do this, I would venture to say easily between 30 and 50% or more of the citations that are part of a ChatGPT response are either DealerRater or Cars.com. It's mind-boggling. And I've literally had dealers share that with me and said, I actually had gotten off of Cars.com. I went back on Cars.com because now it's not just a matter of the value of the leads that you're getting. It wasn't just a matter, hey, they're great people to work with. But now it's the power of that contextual side that is powering these AI searches. Do you agree, Brian?
100%. So there's two main things that have changed, I think, in the last 6 months, and they've changed in a huge way. One of them is like the recent Clairvoyance study that came out when I was talking to Steve White. He really opened my eyes on that it's very similar to the relationship between, say, Samsung and Best Buy. And Samsung partners with Best Buy because Best Buy has the audience and people go there to be able to look at different things and compare. Well, marketplaces have changed. Most customers, in this path to purchase, we see they start off at connected television or OTT, and then they end up from there on a marketplace. From there, they'll typically convert to a dealership's website, but there's not always attribution with the deep links and that sort of thing, or maybe everybody doesn't have it set up correctly. But that's the path to purchase. And it was, in the 80 percentile that are hitting one of the three major marketplaces. So if I'm in retail, and I'm not even just signing up for Cars.com, actually, I would sign up for all of them because that's where customers are. And here's the other things that I've learned that I didn't know then that I know now. People, I guess it's common sense, but it's not like people are getting on Cars.com to look for dishwashers or refrigerators. They're getting on there to look for a car. So that in-market audience, when most people are advertising, they're saying, what's your CPM, the cost per thousand impressions? And you can say what it is on Google, but on Google, you don't know what they're looking at. On Cars.com, they're looking for a car. So that in-market audience, if even the cost per lead or the cost per acquisition is the same, the targeted audience is so much more targeted. We have products like our Car Social, where it'll retarget across all the social media sites. But when you're retargeting with us, you can retarget with anybody, but you're only retargeting to customers that are in market in like the last 7 days, 14 days, which is the richest by far audience that there is.
Yeah, the way I look at it is this. The way I look at it is this, is that, when obviously Google's gotten a whole lot of play, right, in terms of some marketing budgets out there. But whether you're doing marketing on Google or you're doing OTT or you're still doing some kind of streaming and, anything like that, in any given day, it's said 2.5 to 3% of the population is in the market actively for a car. So I said, okay, well, let me do the numbers. Well, you're going to give me 1 million eyeballs. All right, well, 1 million eyeballs, if I take that down to 2.5%, that's 25,000. Well, there's a big difference between 1 million. I'm paying for 1 million eyes, only 25 grand on the market. But wait, hey, like a late night infomercial, there's more. The OEM you have only has, say, 4% market share. Okay, well, that means of the 25,000 eyeballs you're getting, likely only 1,000 are going to be in the market for a car of that brand. 1,000 of the million. And then I'm looking at the marketplace. I'm going, okay, hold on. What percentage of the people in the marketplace are in the market for a car? All of them. Doesn't mean all of them will buy. Doesn't mean all of them buy this month. But when I did the research, and I may not be right, but when I did the research on all of these,
makes sense.
Right? No. I know all of that is right. Trust me, I've been doing that for 20-something years, measuring the accountability and performance of ad dollars. I hate wasting ad dollars. In fact, I came up with a quote years ago that says it's now optional to waste money on advertising, and that's true. What I'm saying is I don't know that 100%. I know that the people that are on the marketplace are all in the market for a car. Don't know whether they'll all buy this month. But from what I can see, roughly 80% of them are going to buy something in the next 6 months or so. Now, could you imagine if every lead a dealer got, you knew 80% was going to buy in the next 6 months? That blows anything out of the water in the OTT or digital or Google side. Don't you agree?
100%. And when I take a look at these metrics now, with our marketplace and other marketplaces, it's pretty much indisputable to me that that's where it's at, but it's not even where it's at today. It's where it's like continues to go, because if you're not specifically with us, as ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, as clients start looking for those things, where should I buy a vehicle? And you're not building out your dealer rater profiles, which that's another thing. And I admittedly didn't spend as much time at the end of my career on that as I would today. I would be reinventing it. It's all written in schema. It's all easily accessible by AI agents. So when AI is scanning websites, it's like catnip, for ChatGPT or something like that, along with the citations, that user-generated content like Reddit, which DealerRater is, 23 million reviews over 15 years, is just like, it's candy for these search engines because it's written in structured data. So I'll say it like this, and I think you'll definitely appreciate this. You were talking about effortless earlier, removing the friction. It's one thing to remove the friction for the clients. The future is going to be removing the friction for the AI agents that are searching your site. Is it easy for them to find information? Is the user experience on your website easy for an agent, or is it easy for you? And if you have things that go below the fold and your mobile site, responsiveness isn't set up correctly, and you haven't spent more time, but it's already 38%, but next year it's supposed to be 65% of all internet traffic is going to be bots and agents. If you're not thinking about that and you're not prepping them for that, and I'll tell you that cars.com is already built for that. Dealer-inspired websites were built in automotive schema. It was invented and born in Naperville, Ohio, back when Naperville, Illinois, when Joe Chur was just founding it with Google in the Dealer Inspire offices is where it was born. Along with Dealer Rater, all of that is all built for this new world to be appealing to agents, bots, and with citations and everything else that we're talking about. SEO, it's, debatable. We're still, I think first in all of that as well. But when it comes to GEO, we're definitely the leader on any of these, Atlas search or anything that you're searching in terms of AI visibility. And I don't think it's even close.
Yeah, I agree. It's fascinating. And, this is, I always look forward to conversations, with you. We've had more than I can count. And every time I'm so intrigued, I'm so fascinated, and I really thoroughly enjoy the conversation. This is clearly no different. I have to say, I feel very confident, thanks to you, that people listening have gotten an awful lot out of this conversation. So I, first and foremost, Brian, want to thank you again for taking the time. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate any time that we have the opportunity to sit down.
iron sharpens iron. I love mixing it up with you.
So, and there's going to be more because there's so many other things I wanted to get to, but I'm glad that we were able to get to some of those. I mean, the bottom line here for those that are listening is that the world, you hear all the time, the world is changing. This is not evolution, and it's a shame to even call it a revolution. I don't think that's strong enough of a term for what we're seeing today. And, you know, when you look at organizations, I will touch on this next time, but we talked about the organizations like Carvana, where 35% of the cars are selling was done by AI agents, and 65% of the cars are acquiring. So anybody out there that thinks, hey, we're catching up with Carvana, right? Because now we're using technology to appraise a car instead of a human. Now we're using this link. I'm telling you, it's just became even more important to have a premier partner, you know, like yourself, like Cars Commerce, and like this ecosystem. This is not just what I love about it when I talk to my clients that are partners of yours. You have Fletcher Jones, and you have Sheehy, and you've got CASA, and you've got AutoNation USA, you've got DuPont Registry. When you talk to these people, you know, it's from acquisition, it's like from pre-tail, right, to acquisition, starting there, to being able to retail, to getting better quality leads, and even to having an exit strategy now that they acquired Dealer Club. So you're talking about a complete ecosystem, and that happens to be connected to a company that actually values the dealership's relationship and putting the dealer first more than, yes, making money, in my opinion. That's my opinion. So I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you are literally, you got to reintroduce yourself, I'm sure, to your wife and kids at times, because every time I talk to you, man, you're on the road. But that's
I'm
why
on the
I
last
said,
leg. I'm finally heading back.
That's good. Home for the holidays. It's a Christmas song. But I'm glad to hear that. But you spend an awful lot of time on the road, and that means you're in the real world, right? I travel half the year because I want to be in stores.
It's not work.
What?
It's not work, and you do the same thing. It's not
People
work.
ask me, why do you do that?
I just want to innovate.
I just turned 66. David, why do you do that? Because I freaking love it, right? Because I can't imagine not doing it. And why do I want to talk about things that are theoretical in nature, hypothetical in nature, you know, maybe try to do this when I could be in the store of some of the best operators in the United States, learning right now what are their pain points, what's their challenges, and how do you solve them? And I think the things that you just shared is going to take everybody an awful long way to being able to do exactly that. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Look forward to hanging out with you again. I'm probably going to try to steal your time again one more time between now and the holidays, but I promise I will make sure that we have a good time. Brian, thank you. And for all of those that took the time to listen, thank you. Appreciate it immensely. Hope truly that you got as much out of this as I did. Please take the time, please, to share this episode to people that are really interested in solving these challenges, acquisition challenges, marketplace challenges, once and for all. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time on the David Spizak Show. Brian, all the best, safe travels, and talk soon.
Thanks, David.
Be well.